Welcome to The People's View, a program dedicated to discussing local, state, and national issues and their effect on the American people. The People's View provides a platform for state representatives and national figures to present their viewpoint. Whether it's social, economic, or financial topics, you'll hear it on The People's View.
Hello, and welcome to People's View, sponsored by the Nashua Republican City Committee. And if you want to find out more about them, go to the website at nashuagop.org. And today, we have the Majority Leader, Representative Peter Silva from Ward 8, and I'm Carl Seidel, Representative from Ward 1. So today we're going to talk about the election. What else?
It's getting close, isn't it, Carl?
It is.
These 2 years go by pretty fast.
Well, we came in together, Pete, and let's keep going together. But some of the controversial things that are coming up are the constitutional amendments that, as part of leadership, can you give us a better view of these constitutional amendments and what?
Yeah, we kind of touched on them early on. One of them that we didn't get passed that we wanted to, what people refer to as the Claremont Amendment, more of the education funding. And one of the problems I had back then is I wanted to have that get on the ballot, so it would have got a lot of publicity. And I think you and I were talking off camera, a lot of these amendments, people don't even understand how they work.
That's right.
I don't know how you can explain in a few sentences what a 50-page amendment has in it. And that's kind of what we're doing with this. So unfortunately, you need, if the audience doesn't know, as you know, you need 2/3 of the people voting to pass it. So that's not easy to do. And I think the lack of information on it, and to try to boil it down to a couple of sentences, it's going to be difficult. Everyone knows that going in. And I guess it probably should be when you're going to change a constitution. But there's some of them that are important. And I think one of them is, number one, is on taxes.
Right.
Not having an income tax. And we've gone through this, you and I think the people, I know we talk about New Jersey a lot, but my home state of Connecticut, they passed it, and I think it was 96 is when they passed it. It's now 9%. So they're going to go, temporarily do it. They have the highest in the country, I believe, right now, Connecticut. They have every other kind of tax. And that's the part that gets me with everybody that's lived in this country and is, paying taxes and is an adult and working and everything else, has been on their own to try to survive. They can't think of one time that a government took a tax and said, okay, we don't need it anymore, and gave it back. It just doesn't happen.
No.
I mean, if it did and there was a precedent, that'd be great. But that's why this one's really important, I think, that, people say, well, how are you going to get revenue? Well, you got to stop spending. And everyone hears it, but I go back to me and common sense. Like you run your own family. You've got brothers and sisters or relatives that you say to yourself, you hear their credit card debts they have, and you're at your family function and they're talking about $10,000 in credit card debts, and they're just paying the minimum and interest. How do you get ahead?
Yeah.
You can't. And that's what we've done with ourselves here. So,
well, you're right. People just don't realize the importance of balancing a budget, and I think they just want that out there. That's their. Since some people think it's a safety net, but that's not a safety net. That's a net with holes in it, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you fall through one of those holes and you just keep on going and going and going. And you brought up two good examples in New Jersey and Connecticut, but there's several other states that are just like that. And most of them, most of the ones that are showing recovery from the recession are the ones that don't have an income tax. And all we're doing is we're trying to put that into the Constitution so that if anything happens, you're going to need a supermajority to get something, maybe on an emergency basis. But I think instead of arguing every time, that we're not going to, I'm not going to vote for an income tax, put it in there and then force the people to be a little bit more analyzing their budget and finding out where the best area is to get increased income. And I think you and I agree from a long time now the best way is to grow the tax base, not the rate, but the tax
That's right.
base. And both of us are pushing for better business area, environment.
And I think it's not the average person's fault. I mean, I think people like you and I are political geeks. I mean, it's what we do. We watch all the shows. We pay attention. You're just so caught up into the thing. It's almost addictive in a way. But if you're not like that, and you don't have that same access, if you will, to what we see and how the things work, it's hard for the average person to even, I don't know if they say care, but I think they feel helpless.
Yeah.
That no matter what they do anyways, it doesn't make any difference. And I think if anything, if we can pat ourselves in the back, you can make a big difference in 2 years. And there's no question this public in New Hampshire, they woke up 2 years ago. Now, that was before the media. You know, to me, I get upset with liberals and all the other things that go on with what they do. Our biggest enemy that right now is the media. I mean, it's so lopsided, and I think, thank God, that between this Benghazi thing and all the things that are going on nationally, that helps us locally.
Yes.
But they're starting to expose them. And you could see almost, I heard people say, which I think is true, if this Benghazi thing blows up this week, or within the night, before the election, in other words, you're going to watch them run from Obama, because they won't give up their party for one person. That's what they're good at. It's their party. So they're going to turn on this guy in a New York second. And they're starting to a little bit already, I think.
I think you're right. I've listened to some of the morning shows yesterday, and it was, a lot of people are just sort of being caught up in trying to explain away this whole situation. You can't do it.
I don't know how you're going to do it. And, you know, I love Laura Ingraham, and she was on a Fox show yesterday. I think it was a Fox show. Well, it doesn't matter. They had this panel anyways.
Yeah.
And she looks to one of the editors of the New York Times and says, you know, if this was a Republican, you guys would have had people at everybody's door waiting there every morning when they came out and harassing them. You're nowhere to be found. Yeah. How can you, I mean, how do you operate like that? And I think it's so blatant now that it's like hitting someone in the head with a hammer. And people are starting to say, wait a minute, something doesn't smell right here. And I want to see the thing, if it's done the right way, we're going to know about what happened. I don't know if they can hold off for 3 weeks.
Well, some of the shows are showing a little bit of that. They were questioning, other than the Fox station. You look at the CBS Face the Nation. They were questioning some of the things. And I think you're right, that the media isn't going out and going after the details. What Joe Biden said on his debate there was, you know, first of all, they demonize the opposition, saying they're lying about everything, and then they go out and tell something that's contrary to the facts that were exposed in the Senate hearing.
And again, as we talk about how everything, you know, starts local, let's take the governor's race, for example, here. Hassan actually has the gall to say that she balanced the budget. They just say stuff. If they don't get caught on it, hey, we got away with it. If they do, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I mean, you can't make it up. I mean, that takes guts to do that. And luckily, Ovid has a responding ad to it. I don't know if you've seen it, but it shows the same thing, how she has an ad, how first thing she'd do is balance the budget and all this stuff. And then he goes back to contradict. But how can you just, if a Republican did anything like that, with the way the media is, be crucified? You know, and so it's strange how the double standard is, that's probably not even the right word. It's not even a double standard. It's like it's not even playing in the same ballpark. We have to go through every single thing. If we do one little thing wrong, it's all over the media.
Well, getting back to these constitutional amendments, I guess one thing that bothers me is the fact that our local paper, the Telegraph, came out with a big editorial against this judicial rule constitutional amendment. I don't know if you want to get into the details on that, but it was contradictory to the facts. We're not trying to to take over ruling over the judiciary. We are trying to correct a mistake that was done decades ago, and the fact that the one thing they left out of the editorial was the fact that the actual language of the constitutional amendment was written by two Supreme Court justices. And they agree that this matter had to be corrected, and we went along with their language for the amendment that corrected the responsibility of the judiciary versus the legislature. The legislature makes the laws, and the judiciary goes and evaluates them as to the constitutionality. And that's what it clarifies.
Yeah, see, and that's the beauty of a legislative effect and things. You can vote them out every 2 years, and that's one of the problems I have. On top of this whole thing is I disagree with these appointed judges. I'd rather see them elected. And, you know, the big argument you get is, well, then there's corruption because they need to raise money for campaigns. Well, at least they have to campaign.
Yeah.
You get to vet the guy in public, where these appointed ones, especially at the end of it, you know, you see it again. Look at the Supreme Court justices. When everyone will tell you that's the most important facet of the president is his ability to appoint judges. It shouldn't be like that. And these people in these black robes that get, I think it goes to their head, most of them. How else do we look at these, the redress and grievance committees? You know, you would never even hear these things if we weren't doing that. Now, whether they're right or wrong, it's the point of if you get a series of things going on, there's really nothing you can do about it unless you elect them.
And that redress is written into the New Hampshire Constitution. That's one aspect of it that when I first ran and understood these things, amazed me. Anybody can go to their state legislature and put together an argument of what happened to them and why that was wrong. And now we have a redress committee, which wasn't allowed under the Democratic administration, that can vet these things, really analyze them. And I don't know how many cases were, but at least over 20 cases were handled over the last year. And some were found valid and some weren't. But now we're looking at it and saying that, okay, the process isn't working. Let's try to correct the process so that this doesn't happen again. The redress isn't something where we're trying to retry somebody's situation. It's how to correct the process up there. And I think that's where that goes wrong, because the legislature, as you say, is the only one that comes up to have to defend itself. The other ones just keep on going.
And they kind of don't really even take it seriously. Even in the redress thing, the judges know. They don't have to do anything. They never show up, first of all.
Right.
Until there's subpoena power given. It's a good start. But unfortunately, I think that, and I was very careful to let any of the petitioners I had know going in, the odds of anything happening with this is very slim. And the biggest result you're going to get anyways is the best case scenario is a piece of legislation to change what happened in your particular instance. You can't change the ruling. And I don't think everybody understands that. So they think that you're going to go in there and be able to pull these people in and make them, you know, come clean under oath as to what happened. They don't even show up. And the ones that do are arrogant. I know that there was a hearing with the Liquor Commission thing. I didn't go to it, but I know people that were on the panel. I think, weren't you on it?
No, I wasn't on it, but I did attend a couple of them just to find out what they're doing. And it is interesting to go through the detail. And we have Lynn Ober is the chair of that committee, I believe, and she's going through that in detail to really try to find out what happened.
But I understand they're fighting the whole way. They don't take them seriously, and I'm not going to answer that. They don't care. So here's, again, appointed people. It's unfortunate, but you know what? It is reality. That's how life works. So to believe that you're going to put these people in there and they're just going to be honorable forever, most of them are. But when you get a bad apple, what do you do with them?
Well, the concept, I remember our first year when they wanted to revamp that whole liquor commission and separate them out, treat them as a entrepreneurial group within the administration. Well, I don't know if they're entrepreneurial, but sometimes you wonder what the motives are in some of their decisions. And now we have a situation where They lose how many thousands of dollars of
Yeah.
wine, and they have 3 guys there that can't really work together as well as they should be. And they hide the cost of it and whatever they can get as profit out of the whole thing. So while there were some good aspects of it, I think it all went wrong. And it was an eye-opener for me anyway, to see how things could, be so illogical to come up with a committee. And I don't know whether they finished all their hearings or not.
I don't think they're done.
I think
I
they
know there
still
was
have to-
one, the one I was talking about was last week's, and
Yeah.
it seemed like they didn't come to any conclusions yet, so I think they're...
They're still going through, and
Yeah.
it's almost like a federal investigation. It never ends sometimes, and you don't get a conclusion. Hopefully we'll get a conclusion. But I would bet that the logical ending of this is that the legislature is going to change the situation to where it's back into the fold of another agency that gets audited, gets reviewed, and has the same...
Well, isn't it our biggest income?
It's
up there.
one of the biggest things.
So how do you not monitor that? I mean, you're not talking about a fruit stand.
That's right.
But, it's unfortunate that you have to look at everything as if there's potential for it to be corrupt, but there's so many examples that it is that you have to monitor
Well, it's
it.
a combination of potential corruption and just laziness or incompetence, I don't know, on some of these people. I don't think they really look for the business acumen that is necessary to run something like that.
I'm sure if you, this is my cynical side, I'm sure if you analyze the majority of these appointed positions, it's all cronyism or nepotism or both. Mm-hmm. And that's what you get. If it's not the, oh, sure, you can, they might as well pick me to run the liquor commission because I drink a lot. So go ahead, yeah. He must know how to, sell booze. So that's the thing. They don't, the vetting process, I'm sure, isn't.
Well, one thing that bothers me is the way the agency heads are appointed for a fixed period. And the executive council obviously approves of it. But sometimes if you change governors or you change the administration somehow or the legislature, you're stuck with somebody in there that's you can't easily remove.
Right. And they know that.
Yeah.
So
I think that has to be.
How's your race going?
It's going fairly well. The 3 of us in Ward 1, I think, are doing well. I'm very proud of my cohorts there. They've been very active. They were relatively new. And you talk about 2 active committees. One's on the Redress Committee and one's on the Commerce Committee. And they've been very good. And we've all been very active in getting legislature through, which is in conflict to the preceding ones that we had 4 years ago that were in there. But one of the things, let's talk about the show for a minute. You brought this up, and this article in the Hippo is a good article on Homegrown TV. And we're...
Well, I know Dick Gagnon, who runs the station, if for people don't know, he brought this to our attention, and I haven't even read it yet, because it just come out today, but it's a pretty extensive article. I think it starts on page 16 and goes to 21, and just shows what things like this do. And I can't, for people who haven't come down and see what they do over here, it's just a great opportunity for anybody.
Yeah.
They still look for shows to do. I think kids should maybe get a little bit more involved in it. I don't think they realize what's here. There's some creative minds out there that can do things. And again, these are the things that these are the type of things I agree with. Like, I also agree with killing Big Bird, by the way. You take things like that. You make something successful.
That's right.
You can't tell me what Big Bird would be worth in the open market. Can you imagine, like Disney? People would be killing to pick up Big Bird in Sesame Street. But they try to, again, spin it the other way around. But this is really, as it says, homegrown. This is our local, just for those who don't see it, it's a front page article. So check it out. Pick up the Hippo and look and see what they're doing down here. I still get comments about the Silva skillet, which I got to start back up again. But
well, Pete, I think we wanted to get into this because we were upset that the people weren't getting informed. So you started the radio show,
Yeah.
and it had morphed into this one with the TV. We're getting more current discussion on some of the things that are happening up there in the state legislature, trying to get people more interested and seeing a viewpoint that isn't coming out into the media. So I think this is the media where anybody can, and you know, the Democrats and the Republicans both have their point of views being discussed on this.
Yeah, well, that's kind of why Glenn Beck formed his own station.
Right.
And luckily I have Dish, so I'm able to see it. What a difference when you watch them do the news.
Yeah.
And doesn't matter who it is. You know, if it's a Republican did something wrong, then here it is. And he's more of an independent anyways.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's what this does. It's unfiltered. We still can't swear, but we can do pretty much everything else. I just think it's a great facility, and it's a great opportunity for people that want to.
And I think that one of the aspects that isn't clear, people talk about the Republicans being ultra-right, and that's not true. If they ever look at some of the activist analysis of the voting records up there, you'll see that the Republicans are spread out across, there must be 5 different activist groups within the Republican Party, whereas our opponents are grouped together, and they're the ones that are not letting some of this, you know, working together. There are some committees that work very well together, and there are some that are, you know, just one side.
The funny thing is, if you take an I'll call it a moderate Democrat or an old-fashioned Democrat, that, you know, who was playing it? I think it was Beck was playing it last week. He was playing a speech, a campaign speech that Kennedy gave in '62 about basically the same tax plan that Reagan did in the '80s. And you would never, he could not be a Democrat if he said that today, first of all. But here's their God, the one I'm talking about. I mean, he is, other than, and even Obama, now I think he's going to go back, he's coming back down to earth. But Kennedy still maintains like the icon. And that's how he's talking. So if you take the average working Democrat that's not in a union, and a public union, I should say, and you ask them to break down each issue that we did here in New Hampshire, they'll agree with almost every one of them. If you don't tell them whose idea it was. If you just say, here's the plan, this is why we did it, yeah, that's a good idea. We have to do that almost every single time. But then again, it goes back to the party thing, and you just, for the life of me, I can't understand, even if you have to admit that Obama was a mistake. They have to know that. Unless you're driving a Prius or a Subaru and you're a professor at Dartmouth, you should pretty much admit that this was a mistake. And you could see, I mean, I'm back in the workforce driving down to Boston every day, and last 4 years ago, there was Obama-Biden stickers on everything. The only ones I see now are Priuses or Subarus. So they're gone anyways. You're not going to do anything with them. But you could just see that, you know what, I don't know if this is such a great idea. And ultimately, you saw what the real Democratic Party is today. It's Joe Biden. When he was up there being arrogant and just, it was gross. And I think he actually PO'd a lot of people with it. But the base loved it because they're nasty. When you confront one of the liberals in a committee, or you confront them in the hallway, or even on the floor, when they get confronted with facts, what do? They get nasty. They turn mean, and they just start with their rhetoric. And that's the beauty, I think, of this election cycle. I'm hoping that people are finally, they're waking up. I have relatives that they've had it. This is not right. And the good thing is they have an alibi. The alibi is the media. They're starting to realize, well, it's not really, it's just that the media is bad. Well, if the media is bad, we have to go for the opposite of who they're picking. So maybe finally
I hope so.
the proverbial light bulb is going off.
Because we've been demonized enough, I think, out there. And I still bring up the other the constitutional amendment that you brought up earlier that didn't make it to the ballot of the educational funding. What happened there?
Well, this is a good thing about having TV that's not edited too.
Yeah.
And I was involved in a pretty big controversy with it. We had a lot of our brethren, as you talk about the different factions, libertarian side and free staters that are in New Hampshire. 90% of the votes, they're with us.
Mm-hmm.
This was not pure enough for them. So why I got upset, and I went to I went to Josh McClellan,
mm-hmm.
and I asked to talk to him afterwards, and I said everything I meant. The problem is they didn't play the last part of what I said. So what I had said was this was an opportunity for us to get this thing in the media,
mm-hmm.
and by not doing that, by not going through with it, getting it on the ballot, it's dead. We would have had 4 or 5 months
mm-hmm.
of. That was a very controversial topic, the Claremont thing, but nobody knows what it is. It took me, as a legislator, I don't even know how many times to kind of understand it. Well, no one's going to understand that in a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened with that. That's why I was upset about it. And there were people, and close friends of Bill's, that voted against this. And afterwards, every one of them admitted it was probably a mistake. Well, it's too late now. And I had just became leader a couple weeks prior to that, so I didn't have time to tell my story to them, to
mm-hmm.
just say, look, this is a chance for free publicity, because they're going to put this in the paper every other day. Every Sunday it'll be in there. And I think that's all that happened, Carl. It's very complex to understand the way that the school funding goes, and we know that's the biggest part of all of our budgets is schools. And when you have a declining population
mm-hmm.
of school students, which is, every year it's gone down, they keep building more schools. Do we really need to do all that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And that all comes into funding, and that's what this was. But that's what happened. We had some real purists that were worried that, which it's honorable as you could possibly be. I mean, I credit them for their integrity. But unfortunately in life, it's not just black and white. That's why I guess I'm a salesman. You do have to sell things now and again.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that bothered me, is that we tried to get together with the administration, and my understanding was that it really hung on the word responsibility.
Yeah, it was one word.
And that was the one word that the governor wanted, and he said he'd get Democrats to vote for it. And how many Democrats voted for it?
Well, we talked about that
One.
then. And again, it goes back to how we started this.
Yeah.
Look at that. Where's the honor? Where's the dignity? To actually, the Democrats knew it too. They were saying before the vote, you know, guys like Campbell were telling me, you're not going to get any votes, you know, on this thing. I don't know what he's talking about. And sure enough, he just, how do you lie like that?
Yeah.
No, he could care less.
Yeah.
Disappeared.
Yeah, and so it didn't get on the ballot.
What was it? What did it lose by? It wasn't a lot.
No, it was
7 votes?
No, I
13?
think it was maybe 13, 14, somewhere in there.
So think about that.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, as I said in my interview that I did in Channel 9,
mm-hmm.
it wasn't, they did play that. It wasn't the you know, 10, 15 votes, whatever it was, of our people.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have any.
Yeah.
You know, they could have done what they wanted to do. If we had 15 Democrats, and think about this, you can't tell me, it's almost like the voter ID thing.
Yeah.
If they go to their neighbors right now, go talk to a Democratic neighbor and just say, do you think we should have voter ID? 95% of them are going to say yes. Not one Democrat voted for voter ID, not one. Mm-hmm. You can't tell me they're doing this really unique, crazy thing called representing their constituents. Isn't that, that's weird, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's times we make, someone was talking to me about Scott Brown last week. He had a couple controversial votes, but not to his constituents. That's what the overwhelming people wanted. Right. So in his defense, he's representing his state of Massachusetts, which is liberal. But
they're still trying to paint him as a right winger.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And
which I think helps him.
Anyway, it's very interesting up there, Pete. I think you're going into I don't know whether this is going to be your last term or not, but I hope you're in there.
You know, as I've been saying lately, unfortunately, the thing I love the most about the New Hampshire legislative system is the thing that I hate the most. I love that we do it for free. I love that it's volunteer, because I think we can say whatever we want to say about our friends on the left. I hate when people say that. not our friends on the left, the people on the left. I do have some friends in there, but not in general with them. We just don't agree when it comes to legislative things at all. But you can't do this and work. And it caught me. You know, I'm a perfect example of it. I'm trying to start a new business, and it's going to be difficult to be in leadership. So I'll still have influence, I'm sure, but the majority leader is a full-time job.
Oh, it is. I don't think people understand how much, you know, they see that we only vote once a week.
Yeah.
But the committee meetings and the stuff that has to go into putting legislation together, that's reasonable to vote on.
1,200 bills.
Yeah.
The leadership office has to vet all those.
Over a 2-year period, it's over 2,000.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of it.
And we're the only state in the country that hears every single bill, gives the opportunity for every bill to be heard, I should say. Every one does have a public hearing, every single one. We're the only ones who do that. So you take any of those positions like that, the majority leader, the Speaker of the House, O'Brien's there 60, 70 hours a week.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, he gets 25% more. He gets 125, so he should be up there more. But you can't do it, and that's why my last hurrah, I'm going to fight hard to go back to an every other year legislative system. For those of you who don't know, it was in the 70s it changed. So it's not like this is 100 years old. It's in the 70s, 1970. I think it was.
And other states do that too.
Most of them do. As I say, Texas.
Yeah.
You know, I learned all that through Perry with the campaign.
Yeah.
10th largest economy in the free world.
Yeah.
They go every other year.
Yeah.
And they have 140 legislators, not 400. That's not even to me, that doesn't really matter because they got the seats there anyways, because it doesn't make a difference. But I'd also like to see them do like aldermen do. Start at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, yeah.
That would eliminate some of the, bloviating that goes on up there.
Yeah.
You hear people say, well, a lot of the older folks can't drive at night. Well, what about our younger folks that can't work during the day? Yeah. So I think it needs to be looked at again, because what's happening is special interests that understand the way that our system works on both sides. If you look up the Free State Project, their goal is to take over the legislature in New Hampshire because it's so easy to do because we don't get paid. Yeah. Then you take Firemen's Union, for example, their goal is to take over to protect their pensions. So I started to do a couple of surveys at the end to see there's 67 employees or either receive public pensions, have a spouse that receives a public pension, or are now public employees. So the first thing we're going to do when we get back there is I want to see a rule put in that you cannot vote on anything to do with
conflict of interest.
Yeah, it has. That's just a no-brainer. You cannot vote on anything to do with the budget. That has to do with pensions. Obviously, the state, the other things, but those bills are easily broken out, and there's a big difference. They all have their separate thing. But it's ludicrous to think it's okay for me as a fireman or as a
teacher or
whatever that's receiving a pension that I'm going to vote on pensions. Are you nuts? But I was involved with a bill that had to do with it's too much detail, but this whole thing with physicians going and being able to prescribe a prosthetic or a medical device and then get paid on that and keep the commission on it. I made sure that I wasn't anywhere on that bill. Obviously I influenced people, which they have the right to do that. They could talk to their neighbors and the people there, but I didn't. My name wasn't on the bill. I made sure that I didn't vote in the bill in committee. The whole deal. So to do these things, those are the things I really want to work on, because that can affect our state for a long time.
What do you think about increasing the number of senators? Because there's only 24 senators. But that's another aspect of it.
I would double it.
Yeah, I think that'd be an easy way of doing it.
Well, I think I might have shared this with you, but great guy sat next to him, Judiciary, Democrat, David Nixon. He was former president of the Senate back in the early 70s. And then he took a sabbatical, and then he came back in our first term. And that's when I sat next to him. And I was talking to him a lot during this 406 debate that we had with the early offer. And he said it the best as I can say it. He said, Pete, when I first came up here, if you saw, for those of you who don't know, the lobbyist wears an orange badge. He said, if you saw 2 lobbyists in the LOB, it was a lot on any given day. He said, when I come here now, it looks like a freaking orange grove. And that just summed it up. So for the people who don't understand, what Carl and I are getting at is us in the House, unless you're like Carl's the assistant chair, if you're a chair, assistant chair in a committee, they might talk to you. If you're obviously the leader, if you're the speaker, they'll talk to you. But for the most part in the House, they just go right by the House and go right to the Senate. Because you only need 13 votes. Think about it.
Yeah.
In the House, you need 201. So for those who have cynical minds, where are they going to spend the money?
Sure.
And it's not illegal. When you get campaign donations, it's all legal
Well, that's
stuff.
another part of it. I mean, they have larger districts. They have to get a lot more money to run. And there's a lot more work for $100 a year.
That's right.
They're working 5 days easily because they have so much I mean, they're on 4 committees each.
No, yeah. 4 or 5.
Yeah, and I'm on one, you know. I mean, that's a lot easier. I think you have twice as many senators is a good idea. That way you don't have to do redistricting.
I know we have the largest House, and I thought it was the smallest, but I believe it's the second smallest Senate. I think it's Vermont. But I'm not positive of that.
Yeah.
But again, you got to fix that. And that right off the bat, that would just, first of all, lessen their load. I saw several situations where senators just weren't, they're reading the bill when they're walking into the hearing.
Yeah.
And I can't blame them, but because how would they do it? And you look at all the ones you lost this year. You lost some really good ones, like Gary Lambert had to go back to work.
Yeah. There's several of them that just ran.
Gruen.
Yeah, he has a business that he heads up. There's several of them, good people that really worked hard, but you know they have to put food on the table too. And well, Pete, you know we've been talking for quite a while here. I think we're going to hopefully we'll solve all the world's problems, or at least New Hampshire's. But we'll have to get together again after the election and analyze everything and see what's going to happen after we reorganize the House and the Senate and see what works up. But thank you very much for your time. And
thank you.
You have, as I said, we can go to the NashuaGOP.org website and find out all the contact information for you if anybody wanted to contact you directly. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Carl. Good luck on the 6th.
Same to you. Thank you.